In this video, we are going to be taking a look at distance, rate, and time. Now, the goal for today's video is to be able to solve problems involving distance, rate, and time. And the essential question that we are going to try to answer is how can you solve problems involving, you guessed it, distance, rate, and time. Now, the first thing I want you to do is turn your standards practice book to page 267. And I want you to follow along as we do these problems together. Okay, now it is important to know that whenever I'm writing something down that you need to write it down with me in your book. Okay, so the first thing we're going to take a look at is you can use a formula. Now a formula, just like whenever we're finding volume, for example, we did length times width times height. Okay, a formula is something that you can plug numbers into and that will give you the answer. Okay, a way to solve the problem. Now, it says you can use the formula D equals R times T to solve problems involving distance, rate, and time. Now, it is important to understand the formula as well. So in the formula, D represents distance. You can probably know this already, but just important to go over really quick. R represents the rate, and T also is going to represent time. Now, the rate is usually a unit rate comparing distance to time, such as something like miles per hour. Now, let's take a look at example 1 together. It says the winner of an automobile race drove 500 miles at an average speed of 150 miles per hour. How long did it take the winner to finish the race? So the first thing we need to do is write the formula. Distance equals rate times time. Okay, now the step 2 is what we want to do is we want to start plugging in numbers for our formula. Okay, so we want to replace the D with 500, which you can see right here, 500, and the R with 150. Okay, times T. So now we have 500 equals 150 times T. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to figure out, use what we know about inverse operations to find T. And the reason why we need to do the inverse operation is because we already know what the distance is. We know what the rate is, so we need to figure out 150 times what number is going to give us 500. Okay, so we take 150 and divide that, 500 divide that by 150. Okay, and that's going to give us 3 1/3. Okay, or if you're doing this on a calculator, it'll give you 3.333 repeating and so on. Okay, so from that, so we know that it takes the winner 3 1/3 hours or 3 hours and 20 minutes. Okay, let's take a look at example 2 now. All right, now we have a race car driver traveled an average speed of 120 miles per hour to finish a race in 2 hours. What is the length of the race? Okay, now what we need to do is understand that we know the rate and we know the time. Okay, now usually whenever we're taking a look at this, usually there's something that's going to be left out, whether it's the distance, whether it's the rate, or whether it's the time. Now, if the rate or time is left out, we need to do that inverse operation. If the distance is left out, we can just multiply the rate times the time. So we place the R with 120, and the T, since it's in 2 hours, okay, it's going to be the time since it's 2 hours here. And we just simply multiply 120 times 2. That will give us the distance, okay, or the length of the race, which would be 240. So the race was 240 miles long. Okay, for number 1, let's take a look at this. It says a cyclist travels 45 miles in 3 hours. Okay, what is the cyclist's speed? So we already know that the distance is given, 45 miles. Okay, so we're going to write the formula. Distance first of all, distance equals rate times time. Okay, now we're going to replace the d with 45 miles because that was the distance. That's how long the cyclist traveled. So replace the d with 45. Replace the t, because we have the time, with 3. Okay, because 3 hours. Now what we need to do, so right now we have 45 equals 3 times, equals r. Let me erase this real quick. R times 3. Okay, so what we need to do in order to figure out what this r is, we need to take 45 and divide it by 3, because we need to figure out 3 times what equals 45. So we'll take 45 and we'll divide that by 3. Okay, that's going to give us 15. Okay, so the rate we can see here is 15 miles per hour. So let's see if it checks out. Okay, so distance, which is 45, equals rate, which is 15, times time, which is 3. So does that equal? Yes, it does. 15 times 3 does equal 45. Okay, so what I want you to do right now is numbers 2 and 3 all by yourself, and when you press play, I will have the answer for you. So pause the video now. Okay, we can take a look at number 2. We have 400 miles here. Pretty simple. Whenever they give you the rate and time, we could just multiply those two together to get to 400 miles. However, we do have the rate, we have the distance, but not the time. So what we had to do for number 3, we took 60 and divided that by 12, and that gave me 5 hours. Okay, let's take a look at numbers 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. I want you to do those all by yourself, and when you press play, I will have the answer for you. So pause the video now. Okay, here are the answers for numbers 4 through 9. I want you to check over my answers, make sure they match yours. If they do not, you may need to go back and rewind some of this video and watch some of the other examples. So let's take a look at numbers 10 and 11. We'll do number 10 together, and number 11 I'll have you do all by yourself. It says, number 10, in an experiment, Ava found that it took a ball 5 seconds to roll down a 80-foot ramp. What is the average speed of that ball? Okay, so understanding that in order to do this, you need to understand our formula. Distance equals rate times time. Okay, now what we do have the distance, which was 80 feet. Alright, however, we do not have the rate. We need to figure out what that rate is, but we do have the time, which was 5 seconds. Okay, so whenever we're missing a rate or a time, what we do is we take the distance and divide that by the rate or the time, and that will give us the missing number here. Okay, so we can take 80, we can divide that by 5, and that's going to give us 16 feet. Okay, so we can plug 16 feet in here for our rate. So 16 times 5 does give us 80. So what is the average speed of the ball? We have 16 feet per second. Okay, what I want you to do now is complete number 11 all by yourself. And when you're finished with number 11, I want you to press play, and I will have the answer for you. So pause the video now. Okay, now for number 11, we did know the distance, we did know the rate, however, we did not know the time. So what you could do is take 1,375, do the inverse operation, divided by 55, and that is going to give you the time, which would be 25 hours, which would also be the answer. So how long will they be driving to reach the park? A lovely 25 hours. Okay, so thinking about our central question as we wrap up, how can you solve problems involving distance, rate, and time? You can use a formula d equals r times x, or distance equals rate times time. And what you can do is replace the variables in the formula with the known values and solve to find the unknown value. So this is how you solve problems involving distance, rate, and time. If you have any questions about this concept, please come and see me.